Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 6 of Sparks in the Dark. We are filming a little bit differently today, as you can tell from the camera, but we are super excited to be here. For those of you who this may be your first episode of Sparks in the Dark,
you've been missing out.
We are a podcast that dives into topics related to reading and writing and just having conversations that deepen our understanding of the power of reading and writing, not only in education, but in our professional and personal lives. My name is Todd Neslony. I'm one of your co-hosts here, and also I'm an elementary principal in Texas.
And hello, I am Travis Crowder. I am your other co-host. I'm a 7th grade language arts and social studies teacher in a small town called Hiddenite. It's in North Carolina. And I'm so happy to be here, and I'm happy to be joined by Brad Gustafson today.
Woo! So let's talk about how we know Brad. Travis, why don't you go first?
Let's talk about how he says better than you say my last name.
Shut your face.
I have a literature and language degree, Brad, so I can pronounce a great number of words.
That was impressive.
Oh, here we go. Already throwing out your pronunciation skills.
So my relationship with Brad is completely limited to social media. So I only know Brad that way. Brad, I think... it may be the other way around, but I think I'm telling the truth. I think you followed me first, and immediately I was like, I looked at your Twitter profile because that's where I know you most, and I was like, I gotta follow this guy. This guy's got a pretty good, his credentials are impressive. He's got a great resume. When Twitter used to give you 140 characters, he did an impressive resume in 140 characters.
Hello.
Yeah, I know, right?
How about just you and I talk, Travis? Sorry. I think
so
my memory is right. I think after your first Sparks in the Dark podcast, I think is when I first followed you. So thanks for starting this conversation up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that Todd and I are humbled by and honored by this opportunity to talk with different educators about issues in education, but also about reading and writing. And he brought you up, Todd did, in a conversation. And I remember asking him specifically about you. I was like, do you know him? Who is this guy? And he started telling me about you. And I was like, this is someone I need to know. This is someone I need to follow. And I'm so glad that we're in the same circle, if you will.
So see, I do say nice things
Todd,
about you.
I'm sorry?
As you can tell, if for those of you who are watching, you can see that Brad and I are in the same room. But if you're listening, Brad and I are here in the same space because we are actually both in Lake Mary, Florida right now. Brad is a new member to the school Scholastic Principal Advisory Board. And so we have our annual meeting and training today, yesterday, and tomorrow. Did that out of order. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And so we were on a quick break, and we had just been hearing a lot of stuff today, and we wanted to do this episode. But I met Brad on social media. We connected on Twitter pretty soon after he got on Twitter. Struck up a friendship between him and another guy, Ben Gilpin, who's a great friend of ours. And the friendship just blossomed from there. We met at a national principal conference, and then we both had our wives there, and they hit it off and became friends. And so now we just do a lot of cool things together. Brad's based in Minnesota, which is really cold, so we don't go there a lot.
Todd's based by Magnolia. What's it called? The silos at Magnolia, Chip and Joanna Games. So we try to go there as much as possible.
Because it's an awesome place. Travis can attest to that too, because we took him there too when he came to visit. But Brad's just been a great friend and an awesome leader. I know that I talk about Brad in every single of my presentations. If you ever see me present, I always talk about Literacy Lanterns, which was an idea from this guy, as well as kind of what we want to dive into here as we begin this conversation. So Travis, why don't you take the lead on this?
Okay, so Brad, the first thing I would like to talk with you is about book talks. And I know that you have some pretty strong opinions about them, and I know that they are all positive. So would you talk with us a little bit about book talking, what it is to you, and why you find it so important?
Yeah, sure. So I do, and I'll put it out there that I think some of my opinions vary from other people, even here at the Scholastic Conference. But for me, a book talk is very basic. Well, I think for most people, it's very basic. It's just sharing authentically why you love a book and why you should get somebody else to read that book. Similar to how we might say, hey, I just saw the movie Black Panther. You've got to check it out for X, Y, and Z. I think where my experience or belief system rests, it's that a book talk should not be a snooze fest that goes on 5 or 10 minutes. So I tend to gravitate towards shorter talks, and I believe that there's a lot of room, and it almost forces you to be more creative and compelling as opposed to just taking 5 minutes to do it. But that's just a personal bias. The fact is, if you're speaking with passion about anything, I guess it doesn't really matter. You can do it for 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Well, you know, you brought up a good point. You actually started this whole 30-second book talk thing. So for our listeners or viewers who are watching or listening, kind of give them a background of how that came to be and kind of where it's morphed into now. Because now it's a big old like Sweet 16 competition. So
sure. Well, Jen Lagarde and I started the 30-second book talk, and really we just collaborated. We wanted a way to celebrate books and really to model. One of my kind of life philosophies is model, don't mandate. So if we're wanting to build a culture of literacy at our schools, that's not something you can delegate. It's something that starts like right here, and then actually reading and talking about books. I'm doing like hand motions here, huh? And he's very nice, not mocking me. He's
not yet.
That'll be later. Yeah, go. What was the question?
So
Travis, do you see what I'm up against here? How do you do this? How do you work with this guy?
I'm glad his microphone is muted.
Let me tell you how I work with him. All the writing I do is in my notebook. And so when I'm finished writing something, I will take a picture of what I've done and I will send it through him to text. And I'll say, look at this and tell me what you think. So I don't have to talk to him.
That is exactly what happens. So just so all you people out there know, that's what Travis does to me. He's like, I don't want to talk to you. Look at this picture of what I wrote down, what I wanted to say, and just read that. But no, you know, the 30-second book talks, you know, there's a hashtag 30-second book talk that people can go and search and kind of see about this.
Can I do a hand motion for that too?
Sure, you can, Justin Timberlake. And then Travis doing it too. So, but I know like this, how did you even get the idea of wanting to start something like a 30-second book talk and then make it, and then getting others out there to share their book talks publicly?
Okay, so this is really interesting. One of my strengths and passions has always been creating and video and technology and things like that, and just trying new things. And then somehow coming across and meeting Jen Lagarde, where her passion was more on the literacy side of things. So it was just this friendship that just blossomed, where I think she definitely stretched and grew me, and maybe in some ways I pushed her out of her comfort zone a little bit. And we have this shared podcast that we do annually, and we refer to it as a world championship of book talks, and kind of joke around that we're finding and the world is picking the best book talk on the planet. But how did that all start? I think it was just out of a place of passion, where just for me, creating these videos and that use social media as a learning media. I mean, that's another thing we're trying to model for our students, that you don't just need to tweet about sandwiches and things like that. It can actually be communicating and connecting your heart to another human being's heart and creating something special together. So that's what Jen and I have done through 30-second book talk.
Travis, you want to take the next one, or you want me to?
Yeah, I do want to take the next one.
You awake there, Travis? We didn't mean to wake you up.
I'm sorry, I couldn't find the unmute button. Like I was like doing this on my trackpad here, and I was like, "Where is it? Where is it? Where is it?" Keep smiling, keep smiling. Yes.
I gotta tell you, Travis, this is a little bit random, but I remember like 9th grade study hall. Now I fell asleep this is high school, obviously. I fell asleep, and at the end of the study hall, the room was empty except for myself and another high schooler named Sarah, and she kind of nudged me, Brad, wake up. I wake up. Drool running down. I'm like, and there's this big pool, and I kind of had to hide it. So thank you for not being comatose so long that we had to have you get the drool off. You're doing great.
No. So it's good. It's good. So I want to piggyback a little bit off what you said, and you know, I often tell educators with I'm gonna blend this with the importance of reading and how this will help stimulate independent reading within your classroom. You know, you said something about it works best when something is, didn't you mention something earlier about things working best when they're not mandates?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. And I think so much about like students in my classroom, when they're forced to read something or when they're required to, it's a little bit more, actually it's a lot more palatable when they're able to choose the things that they want to read. And book talks give them so many options. Book talks open the field for them. They say, you know, these are the books that are out there. You may like this because. Would you maybe speak to a bit about why it's so important that teachers engage in book talks in their classrooms?
Sure. So I'm assuming that every educator on the planet can relate to this. If you're in Target or Walmart or wherever you shop and buy your groceries, you see a kid, they see you from way down the hall, different aisle, they yell your name, you know, and there's just really cool connection because kids love us and we love kids. And the same thing happens where if they find out you love giraffes or ninjas or whatever it is you love, they'll buy that for you during the holidays and just, or make you cards and pictures and talk to you about it. And maybe they don't even talk to you about it, but they will tell their family about it. Okay. And when you take that power and we just think about literacy, one of the core things that we're trying to cultivate in kids just to prepare them for a life of success, it's absolutely no different. So sharing our reading lives and what we're really actually loving and reading is one of the most powerful things we can do. It's even more powerful than telling kids how much I love giraffes, right? Now here's kind of a confession to fold into that. So I've been book talking for a while, but it wasn't always the best book talking because my reading life was pretty dormant. I was stuck in just stuff that I was accustomed to reading long ago. So I've been book talking the book Zoom, which is an incredible picture book, but there have been other picture books that have been written since Zoom came out, you know, a decade or two, multiple decades ago. So there was a switch for me because of other people and reading mentors and friends modeling the way for me about the books that they love. And it kind of had me up my game and realize I can't sit and ride Zoom into the sunset. Our kids at school are counting on their teachers and principal to be reading really great books right now and sharing that passion. So that was kind of I probably answered the next question that you were about to ask too.
Well, you know, and I want to bring something up because, you know, Brad is an administrator. I'm an administrator. Travis is a secondary teacher. We all have super busy lives, and knowing that how important it is for your students to see you as a reader. We've talked about this in every episode. So whether it's you, the classroom teacher, being the reader, or also seeing their administrator be the reader. So of course, the question we get all the time, and I'm sure you get it too, Brad, is how do you make the time to read? How do you prioritize that? How do you schedule it? Because your life's busy just like the rest of ours. And so how do you make that time?
Yep. So it reminds me again when someone says, you've got to see this movie. When someone says that, or you've got to try this restaurant, there's a pretty good chance, I mean, if they give a compelling enough reason, or if they're speaking from the heart, then I'm going to go see that movie, or I'm going to buy that new food. And I really think it's the same for books. So here's a related story to answer the question. I saw a couple of days ago, Todd had put on Instagram Insignificant Life.
Events in the Life of a Cactus?
Yep, that's the book that he was kind of book talking digitally. And I had purchased it a while ago. We probably all have like two read stacks that are taller than
Travis
than
definitely does. I have never met anybody that has a 2 read stack as big as Travis is. Let me tell you, when I went to his house, I was like, there are books everywhere. And he's like, yeah, I'm trying to read through all of them. And I was like, are you kidding me? And then I went into his classroom and he has stacks in the classroom. And I was like, have you read these? He's like, no, that's on the list, but I switched it out with this one. So I put this on the list and then these are over here. And then I just bought these. That's why they're in there, because I haven't had a chance to prioritize when I want to read them. And I was like, God, I thought I had a lot of books to read. And now I feel like, dang, Travis has like 400, literally, you know, I exaggerate a lot, but he literally has like 400 books. And if you go to his house, they're in every single room. Stacks of them everywhere. So, and you know, I'm not lying, Travis.
And what we're talking about here really boils down to the influence that educators have with their students. And it's this sacred trust, but it's also a responsibility. So seeing like a friend and someone that I respect and admire say, this is a book that impacted me. I packed the book and I read it on the airplane and last night, and it's done and I loved it. And I feel like I'm a better person for reading it. And now I'm actually able to connect it to a few kiddos when I get back to school from this conference. So to get to your question, like how do you make time? It's more of a passion and a relational wavelength for me. Similar, it's just like the rest of how I live my life. If a friend says, I'm telling you, this is the coolest thing ever, and then, you know, he's authentically sharing that, I'm very interested in it. Same thing with books. And if that's not happening, if people aren't talking about the books, there's a lot less chance that I will actually make the time or prioritize the time in my schedule.
You know, I think you make a good point. And Travis, you can bounce off of this too, that, you know, as an administrator, when I was a teacher and then I became an administrator, it is super easy to say my life's too busy right now, or I don't have time to get to that. I'm overwhelmed with these things. But I think Brad hit the nail on the head when he said, when you are surrounding yourselves with other people who are passionate readers, it blends into who you become. Because I know for me, and Travis and I have talked about this before, but Travis was that person for me of, you have to read this. And then before I would even be a third of the way through, he would be like, are you done? Because your next book request is going to be this one, because it is so amazing and I need somebody to talk to about it. So you need to read it. Because I know, like, when he read Allegedly, which was one of our first episodes when we had that author on with Sparks in the Dark, he was like, you have to read this book immediately. I am so emotionally overwhelmed right now. I need somebody to talk to about with it. And I was like, okay, I'll sit and read it. Goodness gracious, what is it about? And then as you begin to do that, you feel the excitement building. And, you know, Brad and I, we were at an icebreaker event last night for Scholastic. And before we got here, what they asked all of us to do was they said, pick one of your favorite books that you want to book talk tonight at the event. And I don't have my card on me right here. I'll grab it in a second when I'm done talking. But when we went to the event, we were all assigned tables where there were 5 or 6 and you need to book talk the book that you picked to everybody else at the table. And let me tell you, you know, I was drained from the day. I was exhausted. I was like, oh, let me pull out my extroverted self to make this work. But by the time people get in there and they're sharing these beautiful book talks about these books, I was like, is this conversation over? Because I need to go buy these and I need to start reading some of these immediately. And then, of course, last night I'm in trouble because I spent like $40 more on Amazon because I was like, I'm buying this book and I'm going to buy this book. Because it's one of those, it's like, even these people I didn't know, like hearing them so passionately talk about a book in less than 2 minutes, I was like, I have to have that. I have to read it. And some were picture books and some are chapter books and some are young adult novels. They just ran the gamut, but it was a pretty amazing thing. So I'm going to ask you to do something, Brad. I want you to give us your book talk from last night. Tell us the book, the author, and give us your less than 2 minute book talk.
Okay, so I'm going to go, they had group rotations and I was in one particular group, or the guy we followed, or somehow we were grouped together a couple times in a row. So I actually switched up my book talk for the same book. So I think I'll give my my deeper book talk. But it starts out more with a story, which is an okay way to make a connection, I guess. But my book is Forget Me Not by Ellie Terry. And I remember being in probably around 3rd grade, maybe 4th grade, and reading like a Sports Illustrated article on a baseball player who had Tourette syndrome. And I have Tourette syndrome, and I had Tourette syndrome, and it was really hard. And my tics and stuff aren't as pronounced as they used to be, but I used to have some really significant like neck cranks and stuff like that. And it was really hard as a kid. And I know there were some nights I would go home and like my mom was just patient and helpful and would like try to have me relax in the bath and stuff. But reading that article on that baseball player, it really legitimately gave me hope that I could grow up and like live. And I just, for the first time ever, saw that somebody else was kind of dealing with it, even though it was probably, who knows, maybe just a paragraph long that I read. I don't even remember. But fast forward now more than 30 years, and I came across Ellie Terry's book, Forget Me Not. And Callie is a kiddo who has lots of things that middle school kiddos face. You know, her mom travels a lot and they have to move a lot, and that's a really hard thing in and of itself. She loves outer space and things like that, but she also has Tourette syndrome, and that's something when you're moving a lot and then you're around people who don't know you and kind of what's happening with the neurological disorder, you can only imagine how hard that is for her. So instantly I resonated with her on that level. But I think from an empathy building standpoint, that's a book that will help kids understand that kindness really matters more than they might even know. And I think it gives them a face and a name and introduces them to something kind of bigger than themselves. So that was my book talk.
See, and I love that because what Scholastic did was they told us to pick a book, just like Brad did. and we showed up at the event. And for those of you who are watching live, you can see what they did was they gave each one of us a card that looks like this. It had our picture on it. This is a business card if you're listening. It has our picture on the side. It says I'm book talking, has the name of our book with the author, and then it has our information, our name, our job title, where we work, and then our email address. And then we got a whole box of these. So we have like 500 of these. And so what we did is, as we sat at the tables in book talking, and we saw that a book that we really liked, we were like, hey, can I have one of your cards? And so we walked out with like 20 or 30 cards from last night that already has the book the person book talked, as well as their contact information. And for me, being a school administrator, I'm looking at this going, how cool would it be, as a classroom teacher, if we did this for kids? Mm-hmm. If we took their photo and had them pick a book that they wanted to book talk and put it on a business card. But even as an administrator thinking about my staff, like this could totally be one of our staff meetings, is beforehand me asking all of them, like, what's one of your favorite books ever? And then I make these for them for the meeting, and then they go and book talk and they can trade cards, and then they walk away with all these cards of who they can book talk. I just thought it was such a brilliant idea.
I think it was brilliant. I think it really gets at the power of someone's identity as a reader. Because when we were given these cards, I felt like I wasn't a principal. I wasn't even necessarily a dad, even though I am those things. But I was a reader. I mean, this is my card. That's my book that I'm passionate about. And now I want to enter into that. So I had a little bit of a confidence just because I had a business card that said I was going to book talk Forget-Me-Not. So it just had me think, what are the things we can help our teachers and our kiddos in school see themselves and their identity as readers? And maybe it's a business card that says that, and maybe it's something else.
Yeah, I think you've really raised a lot of cool stuff. A lot of really good points. I'm going to go back to something that you said earlier because I've been muted all this time. But I love how that all of this grows out of passion. It grows out of a love for something. And you cannot mask when you really love something or when you're really excited about something. That is going to rise to the surface. And you're going to, if I stand up and I talk about a book that I love, and I share that I loved it for all of these reasons, not only are they connecting with me on an emotional level, but they're connecting with me on a reading level. They're connecting with me on a deeper human level, because I'm saying to them, not only am I showing them that I am an emotional human being like they are, but also that I may share something with them. This may be something that you love, a book that you love. This may have a part in there. I try when I book talk to students. I have a group of students this year, and they've been quite an obstacle in ways. But I found that I have gotten them through the power of reading, and I've gotten them through the power of book talk. So when I first started talking about books at the beginning of the year, they were polite. They would pay attention out of politeness. Now I've got them where they pay attention because they are anxious to hear what book Mr. Crowder is going to be talking about today. And I love that, because I've connected with them, and I'm not bragging on myself. It's the books. It's the books. That's what does it. Our passion about them. It's life-changing, and it affects students, and it affects us as well. I love the whole idea too of doing this with our faculty. I have always encouraged teachers in our building to keep their reading lives in a place where students and other teachers can see them, such as I post my reading life on my door. My goal every year is to read at least 100 books. And so I get paper and I number it 1 through 100. And then I put that on my door and I write every book and every author. And then occasionally I will, which I should do this more often. So, this is going to go on my professional growth plan, but I try to get talking to two administrators here.
That's right.
I try to get, like images that I can put throughout, because, we are also visual people. But those not only speak to our students, I feel like there's so much connection that can happen between us and our coworkers, you and your teachers, me and my fellow teachers, and then, administrators among each other. I feel like there's such power in that. And, we read, I love the quote by Don Murray. He says, we write to discover what we want to say. And I took that a step further and I said, we also read to discover who we want to be. And I feel like that's why we read. That's why we pick, because that helps us shape who we are. And then that feeds into our identity. I recently did this activity with students where I asked them to, it was a lengthy questionnaire trying to help them uncover what their reading identity is, and hopefully something that will help them continue to choose and I'm sorry, mixing my words right now, select books for the rest of the school year. And I had so many students who, a lot of the stuff that they said, because I asked them, where do you get a lot of the ideas for the books that you read? And they tell me it's the ones you talk about. There's power in them. There's power. We have the power to shape the reading identity of our students. And that is both amazing and humbling at the same time.
Another interesting thing is the power of networks for kiddos too. So it's not just our influence, but if we can somehow have them see themselves or look for readers in friends, even if they're not seeing themselves a reader yet. Because I remember in high school, I've heard people talk about this, but we assume certain attributes of the people that we hang out with. And even there's sayings now, like you're like the 5 people you hang out with most, or something like that. I'm butchering that. Todd will correct me on that later. But when you think about students and kids, imagine if they were looking for other readers and emulating those behaviors instead of just where that person likes to go out to eat. I must be getting close to dinner time. I'm noticing a lot of restaurant references here. Story of my life. But
I feel like it's always close to dinner time with you.
Do you get what I'm saying, though? If kids can look for that in one another, and we can cultivate that, because it's not just about us talking about the book, although I tend to believe it's kind of that for them to want to talk about books with their friends.
Well, and I've talked about before about how outside our classrooms we have the teachers advertise what they're reading currently and things like that. You do that with almost all of your students at your campus, right? Where they all have something out in the hallway where it advertises what they're currently reading. That's such an easy way to get kids to be interested in, because I know for me, like with my ADHD, when I'm walking, I'm looking at everything. And so as a kid moving down the hall, just glancing at those and seeing all the book titles, that's just going to be one more thing that you have to talk about with someone, or you see what they write up there, or you see somebody in different grades. So I thought that was brilliant to have the kids posting outside above their little hook where their backpack is what they are currently reading as well.
Yeah, kind of, if you see art on the walls, there's an implicit connection, or everyone makes their own meaning from that. But I think one thing I would glean would be, this is a school where students are creating and their work is valued. And then when you see what teachers are reading, and when kids above their coat hooks where it says I'm currently reading, whether that's visual or the title, I think it sends a message. Whether or not kids are reading every single title that their classmates or other classes are reading, I think it sends a message. We are readers. And that's a culture thing. I mean, that's a drop in the bucket. But when you have a lot of drops in the bucket, you sooner or later get to an ocean.
You're muted, Travis.
I know Brad's just giving me a lot to reflect on right now. It is, and I've
smooth.
Hey, and that's
like that's called a professional transition right there.
Yeah, this isn't my first time. So, this is a conversation I have with fellow teachers a lot, which is how do I want to say this? Because we promote things based on our actions. Our actions promote our beliefs. And
or
if we don't, right, exactly. And if we don't have, if our students are not reading in our classrooms, that's very evident. I feel like we have enough worksheets to last us a lifetime. We have enough packets to last us a lifetime. Where are the experiences? Are we observing books, or are we actually reading them? And if you're so right, Brad. I mean, you think about that, and students having stuff. I ask my students to, and this is great for me because I've been thinking about ways, how can I get them to break down the walls of my class? Not literally, please, no, not literally, but like figuratively with their reading lives, to see that this reading exists outside of the four walls of this classroom, and opening up those conversations with their classmates, with their peers, with their friends who may be on a different team, or friends who may be in a different grade level. This is what I'm reading right now, and this is why. And I think that's brilliant. How would you feel if, and I'm going to get some professional advice from you now, Brad, but how would you feel about like maybe students selecting, like maybe, do you do this like where they put all the books that they've read, like these are all the books that I have currently read, or did they do it like this is what I'm reading right now, or how did they do
it kind of
that?
follows teachers' passions and ideas. So some classes it's kind of, they must laminate the student little personal thing because kids will write it and they'll update it a week later when they're on a new book. And other classes, they must color copy because they have book images and you can kind of see all the different novels kids have read. It just it varies. You know, not to hijack the question, but one thing I've noticed is we kind of schoolize things, and things lose credibility, like street cred with kids, because education, and I'm pointing my finger at myself on this, we are historically really inauthentic and not as relevant as we need to be for kids. And the same is true for reading, because the book that I just read, because I wanted to read it, because this guy book talked about it on Instagram, I fell in love with it. I loved it. But I don't have to do a packet or a fishbowl conversation or a Socratic seminar on the book now. I just get to talk about it and authentically kind of reflect on it and share it now. And I'm not saying those things are bad, but a lot of times, like here's something that kind of came up at our Scholastic meeting today. A few people mentioned Flipgrid, which is a great video tool and sharing and connectivity tool. But if we start to try to Flipgrid book talks, because it's an idea that we can kind of manage it, share it, amplify student voice, things like that. Once again, we're forcing kids and reading into a hole that I don't think anyone ever intended it to go in.
But that reminds me too of what Donna Lynn talked about today. She talked about how, some teachers, and said she was guilty of it too, they're like, oh, book talking is powerful, so I'm going to have like 2 days set aside where all the kids are going to book talk, and I'm going to have this little rubric back here. And she said, so what does that do? Yeah, your first couple of kids, it may share some great books, but then a kid's nervous to do that. So as soon as they're done sharing, they're like checked out, like, oh, thank goodness that's over. But B, you have some kids who have sat there for like 45 minutes just listening to all these books while you, the teacher, sit back there with a rubric marking things up. It's like, it's not authentic. We've schoolified it, like you said, and we've made it this educational thing where we can get a grade from it, or we can get everybody to do it in that moment. And that's the one thing we've been really trying to figure out as a campus is, book talks are great, but not everybody has to do one every day, the kids. It's like, as a teacher, I want a book talk every day because I know how to get through them quickly, share it based on the interest level of my kids, get the message out there, let's move on with the day. It's not like a 30-minute thing that takes place. But I agree with you. We have to be careful that when we hear about something that's really good for kids, that we don't turn it into this huge educational nightmare. And I know you probably see that a lot too in the secondary world, Travis.
I do see that a lot. And so what I've suggested, like one of the things that I found last year was that I've been trying to answer this one overarching question for the past 2 years, and it's, how can I help students fall in love with reading and writing? And every practice that I do, I really am trying to say, all right, is this going to turn them off? Is this going to make them despise this? Will students standing up in front of the classroom presenting a presentation about, or showing a presentation about a book that they've read, that to me is inauthentic. So what I decided to do was they love to build, and they've told me this, so that's why I know this. I'm not just making an assumption, but they told me we love to create things about the books that we read, and they want to create presentations, and of course they want to share with their classmates. And so I kept thinking to myself, not everybody is going to be interested in every single book that someone creates a presentation for. How can I do this in a way that will be authentic, that will be relevant? So I set it up as a gallery walk, and I had them to get their notebooks, and in the back of their notebooks they create a to-read list. And I said that I wanted them to go around and look at, they would go around. We have Chromebooks, so they hit present and they turned their Chromebook out toward the outside of their desks. And for 15 to 20 minutes, I let them go through and look at the presentations themselves. Nobody stood up in front of the classroom and presented to us all at the same time. They were able to go to some that they found, they were captivated by. And that's one of the ways that I've tried to get around the inauthenticity that often pops up. And, I also do at the back of the room with a rubric, and I'm grading that. I've shared with Todd, I have very strong opinions about grades, and I feel that when we reduce things to a number, that takes all of the meaning making out of it.
Mm-hmm. So I heard you really allude to elements of choice, and you kind of cited multimedia presentations, but it made me think of all the different things I've seen kids choose to just to connect and fall in love with books and communicate to other people what they're reading that aren't adult mandated, like things kids will come up to me and ask if they can do. I mean, that's a good authenticity test, right? So we started this thing called Bookcast this year, and it's basically the next iteration of the Principals podcast, where they just come and have lunch with me and we talk about books, and it's pure joy, and it's all literacy based. And I'm glad that we record it, because no one would believe these kids are talking about this awesome stuff and laughing and snorting Cheez-Its and Cheetos and weird stuff. It's so cool. But that's authentic, right? And that's not for everyone. Not everyone would want to be on Bookcast. And then we have this Lego Build-A-Book wall that
and this is amazing. So if you're not following Brad on Twitter, you need to be. His Twitter handle is @GustafsonBrad.
Can we have Travis pronounce the last name?
Whatever. And so, but when I saw you post images of this, it was incredible stuff to watch these kids create. So tell them about kind of what it is.
Yeah, so just another avenue for kids to love books. So we have just or read a book or hear what they're reading, but they'll recreate the cover scene and collaborate with a friend or more than a friend on this mini Lego wall, and they just get to design their book cover. And the conversations they have as they're putting these Lego pieces together, and I could cite tons of different examples, but the one that comes to mind right away is Scar Island. We had I feel like it was 2 or 4 kids. I think it was 4 boys working on this project, and they were debating the Lego color pieces because the plot of the book, the way they were designing their island, it was too light. They said it needed to be darker because the plot was darker, and they launched into this conversation. I just wanted to give them all a high five, but I didn't want to ruin the moment. So instead, I just kind of listened, and I'm thinking, this is authentic. They're building. This would be something they would actually choose to do.
Oh yeah.
At home, like build, not necessarily maybe about books, but that we brought in the authenticity. And now we have an Eagle Scout who's designing 4 more of these Build-A-Book stations for us, because the first one has been such a smashing success. So can you imagine though what would happen? Here's what we try to do, and here's what I try to do, wrongfully so. We should invest in 800 Build-A-Book boards, because every kid should have to build a book after all the books they read. I mean, it just doesn't work like that. For some kids, it's a dream come true. For others, it's something different. We just have to find the way by knowing the learner.
You're so right, and that's what our job is as educators, is to think about things differently. It's like to not stick with that traditional book report and having them stand up or spend hours writing a book report that makes sure it hits all these certain plot points. Because I can guarantee you the conversations those boys had building that Lego wall book cover was just as rich, if not more so, than any kind of set of answers they would have had to. And the conversation that we get a lot, and we talked about this last week with Jennifer, was the conversation of test scores. Well, how are they going to perform on a test if you're not giving these things? And yeah, you've got to do some test prep questions here or there, but not over the books that they're choosing to read on their own. And I think that when you can get a kid to fall in love with reading, they're going to get so much more from that book than they ever would have from something you assigned them to read, which then plays into all their other reading stuff because they're building up their reading life. Today, Donna Lynn made a point of, sometimes, like as adults, we don't walk, and you've probably heard this before, but we don't walk into Barnes & Noble and say, can I see all of the books that are on Lexile level 782? That's my level. I need to stay within that range. But yet we do that so often with kids, and we have to make sure that we're giving them these opportunities to read all these things without narrowing it down so much for them.
Right. And it all circles back to book talking, because if kids aren't necessarily going to be able to navigate the ocean of amazing books that are out there, especially just looking at a sea of spines in a media center or library. So when we're talking about them and removing the barriers, we help them with their access.
Yeah, that's such a Those are both brilliant points. I was
It
going to
seems like
say
everything
something.
goes back to book talking, does it not? And I'm not just saying that, but honestly, it seems so simple. I think we're looking for something deeper, more complex, more expensive, like a 3-day PD that we need to go to. But if we just authentically and with passion, read a lot, because we're not doing that. It's kind of hard to do compelling book talks with kids and be able to differentiate the choices, right? If I just read 2 books a year, that might serve a few kids. It's not going to serve every single one. Read a lot and then authentically share what we're reading in different ways. That's like the answer. It's so simple.
It is. It is. And also, what would be wrong with asking our students, because I do this, and I know other educators do this, but I know it's not as pervasive as it should be. What's wrong with asking students, how would you like to share this book that you have read with other people? What method, what will that look like? What do we need to do? What can I do to support you to do that? What is it, is it's, let them come up with the output. And I understand giving options, I really do. But, once you get up into secondary school, students are passionate about things beyond school, and they want to see a fusion of outside of school and inside of school. And we so often see, that there's a barrier. There's so often a barrier. And, I've had students before who have come to me and, I talk with them about at the beginning of the year my expectations for them, and I've had students say to me, this is a book that I'm reading outside of school, and I'm like, well, why don't you bring that in? And they're like, I can do that, and I'm like, of course you can do that. Why not? Or I have students who do a lot of writing outside of school. They love to write short stories, and I'm like, that is a perfect thing that you could bring into a writing workshop. I can do that, absolutely, bring it in. It'd be something that you can build. And asking them, what is it, you've read this book. How do you want to share what you've learned with the world? Do you want to do your own book talk? Is there a way, if you want to use something like Flipgrid to share that, then, do that. But I love the idea of letting them come to us. And I know we can't always do that. I know that sometimes there are restrictions, but I feel like that's such a powerful question. How do you want to share?
And who is your authentic audience? Because it's not YouTube for every single kiddo, but it is for a lot. And for some, it is their grandma or their dad across the country, or, every kid has a different authentic audience. And when we just relegate or assume it's the bulletin board and that's our audience, or it's their peer group in that class, or it's the refrigerator at home, it's just we're living in a different parallel universe that our kids kind of need us to wake up from.
Well, and I think you have to be the educator that talks to your students. You cannot get them to buy into a book just because you're going to read it as a whole class set. One of the most powerful things that I heard was from a former who he claimed to be a non-reader. And he said, because in 4th grade, my female teacher read every book she could about Little House on the Prairie or Sarah Jane Plain and Tall or whatever. He was like, and none of the books were for me, but we had to read them all because that was the book she liked. So she picked that's what we're going to read in front of us. And we never got to pick anything ourselves. And I think just like what you're talking about presenting, yeah, you may have 75% of your kids who are obsessed with Flipgrid and they want to do it that way, or they want to build a Lego wall or whatever. But you're going to have kids that aren't all going to buy into that, and giving them that choice and relinquishing the control, which is so hard for educators to say, you know what, guys, talk to me. How would you say is the best way for you to present this idea? Is it through a presentation? Is it standing up for 20 seconds and giving a book talk? Is it creating a video on Flipgrid where you're by yourself in a corner? Is it building something to tell the story of this? Like, how do you want to do this? Because when we do that, not only do we give them ownership, but then we have them be much more passionate about what they're going to create, which will then buy into creating other readers as well.
And I don't remember, I'm not just saying this, I don't remember a single book report that I wrote growing up. I remember the projects I made, and I remember who was next to me when I made them. Honestly, you don't forget that stuff. Yeah. Why do you laugh when I talk? I mean, I'm speaking from right here, and I'm wiping the laughing spittle off my cheek.
I'm wiping it off of my face, too.
Can I share a really quick thing before I get booted out of here? So this morning we were in the Scholastic PD, and they were talking about something about a warning, like they just made a passing warning about not letting maker spaces crush school libraries. In my head,
The funding.
okay.
Don't spend. They made a comment that, you know, there's schools now that are spending all of their funding purchasing maker spaces, and they're not spending the funding to purchase books.
Yep, and I dismissed it a little bit because I thought, oh, okay, I'm not going to do that, no problem. And then I was with a woman who was sharing that in, I don't know if it was her school or their district, they actually, Travis, they got rid of their library. Yeah, that's what happened. And I was in shock. I had to wrap my brain around that. And I'm trying to think from a principal lens. There's always another side to the story. Like, why would that be a good idea? Why would getting rid of all the books? Well, they were trying to build up classroom libraries to compensate. There's a nearby public library that the kids could just, whatever, walk to or take field trips to. And I forget all the other reasons. They wanted to advance kind of STEM or STEAM learning opportunities through maker spaces. And in my mind, I'm thinking if that's the world where some schools, for however well-intentioned they might be, are going, that's like one of the biggest travesties that I can picture in my career at this moment. And our school is heavily into helping kids create, and we use maker spaces and mobile maker spaces as part of that. But we're not doing that at the expense of reading. We're actually injecting and buying titles to push into the mobile maker spaces to enhance that. I mean, reading enhances making. So the reason that I had to get that up is I needed to a little bit get it off my chest. But I texted Todd and I said, I got to talk to you about that, because if that's actually happening in America or anywhere on the planet, even if it's not at our school, we have to help people understand the way that it's not reading or science and engineering.
Exactly.
It's both.
You know, and that's what Travis and I, and you can talk about this too, Travis, this is what we wrote about in Sparks in the Dark, is we really wanted to focus on this conversation is not a conversation just for those teachers who teach reading and writing.
So
this
true.
is a conversation where this has to be incorporated into everything, whether it's your math class, STEM office works at the front of your school. Literacy has to be important because it's the foundation of everything.
Right.
Travis?
If you teach math or science, by golly, give kids books. That's how I swear, by golly. That's about as hardcore as I get, Travis. I apologize. I know you guys like to be a little edgier, but Jiminy Crickets.
Yeah, see, there you go. We just cursed on Sparks in the Dark for the first time, people.
Yep. But I mean,
by golly.
like Forget Me Not by Ellie Terry, if you're a science teacher, right? Every teacher has to read, every principal has to read. And I'll just speak for myself and my fellow administrators. I don't know that we're carrying our learning weight. I don't know that I'm reading enough, and I don't think all my friends are either. We just have to up our game to support our teachers, because we have some amazing literacy leaders in our schools that are they really are feeling like they're doing it alone, or the principal maybe is kind of rubber stamping things, but we really can do better.
So Travis, wrap it up for us.
Yeah.
What are your final thoughts?
All right, so I'm going to say this. I think it's a precarious thing when we relegate reading to the language arts classroom, and we make students see that there are, not only is there a boundary between our school and their outside of school lives, but when there are barriers among the content areas. That my science teacher, we don't read in science because we do science. We don't read in math because we do math. You know, there are plenty of books. There's a beautiful book called The Mathematician's Lament, which is about how there's a beauty and a poetry to teaching mathematics education. It's, you know, and it's a profound work. I recently read the book The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, and I think it's a wonderful book by Rebecca Skloot, and it is, I read it about a year ago, but I consider that recent because I still have it at school and I still thumb through it every once in a while, and I think, what a great thing to read, you know, a great book to read and share with upper middle school and high school students. You use it as, you know, excerpts to teach them about, you know, a certain thing, or use as a mentor text so that they could write their own, because, you know, in the end, that's what these people in these different content areas are doing. They're reading and they're writing about it. I'm really glad that you were a part of this with us this evening, Brad. I really loved hearing your thoughts.
Before you wrap it up, Travis, I wanna ask Brad, what is, now you've already talked about the cactus one, so you can't mention that. What is a book that you recently read that you think is a must read for others, and what is next on your list?
Okay. Must read. I think it depends who who we're talking to.
He makes every question
Sorry,
complicated.
I know I overthink things. It's what I do, Travis. I really liked Overturned. It's a story that takes place in Vegas, and I would say it's probably more of kind of a middle school. There's some edgier stuff in there. That was really good. And EXO was fantastic. I really want that to be a series and a movie series and the whole kit and caboodle. EXO is incredible. I'm a sci-fi geek always, much to my wife's chagrin. So she always cringes anytime anything outer space comes on or Alien.
So what's next on your list?
Wish Tree.
Oh, yeah. We talked about that one today. That one is great by Catherine Applegate. Have you read that one, Travis?
We got
Yes.
at Scholastic. We got they handed out Wish Tree, and as soon as we got it on our table, I'm like, well, there goes my social time. I'm not sure whatever social is planned tonight. I'm not going to be there. I'm going to be reading.
I know. This morning when I woke up, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be there in 5 minutes because I was reading Stanley Will Probably Be Fine by Sally Butt. And I was like, I can't put this down. I just want to skip the first part of the session and try to finish this book. But Travis, close us out.
And
All right,
read EXO.
well, I'm sorry.
He said, and read EXO. That's the book he recommended.
EXO.
Okay.
It's really good.
EXO. Okay, I'll make sure I get that. Well, Brad, we've been so honored that you've been a part of us for this conversation tonight. We're so honored that you joined us to talk about book talking and to help encourage other teachers to book talk. So Todd and I are going to challenge every educator to go into your classroom tomorrow and offer a book talk to your students. What is a book that you're reading right now? And if you're not reading, talk to your students. What are they reading? Talk to your librarian. What would he or she recommend? Talk to other teachers. What's going on? What are the books that our students are talking about or teachers are talking about? Get a book and talk about it with your students, because books and book talks will change lives.
Have a great night.
Have a great night.